You might have to train your fingers for 10 years to make any sort of gains that you could make in a few hours of releasing something that might be in you that you don't even know is happening.
Hey y'all, welcome back to the Struggle Climbing Show. It's me, Ryan. I am your host, and I am so psyched you're here, and you can probably hear in my voice, or my lack of a voice, that I have been incredibly psyched for this entire weekend. I am recording this right now at the conclusion of the International Climbers Festival in beautiful Lander, Wyoming. Holy smokes, what an insane and incredible weekend of climbing and community and stoke and keynote speakers and raffles and just so many stories that from start to finish. And by finish, I mean basically from start to start, because the parties, the after parties, went just about into the next day's activities. It has been just an incredible time here, and I'm going to do a full download on my time here at ICF when I publish an episode, which I think will be next week, featuring a live podcast of podcasters. Sat down with Chris Hampton, Chris Kalous, and Eric Hurst over at The Grill here in Lander, and the crowd was rocking. We had a really interesting and funny conversation that I will be publishing as a live podcast here, and then as part of that, I'll also give a full download because I just had an insane weekend here that I can't wait to tell you about. But I'm not going to tell you about it right now because my voice doesn't have much gas left in the tank, and I want to save it for this intro, a very proper intro for a very proper coach, Belinda Fuller, or Coach B, as everyone knows her as. God, I got to tell you guys, I mean, just without any exaggeration whatsoever, this is one of my favorite conversations that I've had on this podcast in ever, I think, certainly in years. Coach B just has such an incredible knack for taking very complicated concepts, or concepts of which I thought I had an understanding of, and really reframing it through a more intuitive lens and like an intuitive approach to climbing. She presents her vertical dance theory. She talks about how we can master the basics and how that will make us much better climbers down the way. She de-emphasizes the importance of upper body strength and finger strength and really puts a lot of focus on what she feels is much more important, kind of working from the ground up, from the feet to the hips, and then finally to the hands. And maybe more important than any of those things that I just named, the head. We talk about all of that in this conversation, and then make sure you stick around to the end, because what she unlocks in terms of mindset and mental game and addressing the inner critic that all of us have to some extent or another as climbers and just as human beings, and how that dovetails into this organization that she's launched called Climbing Out of Depression. God, this conversation just hit all the right notes for me, and I think it will for you as well. I am so grateful that B was able to open up and share all of this with us here today. You probably recognize B from the videos that she does often with Hannah Morris. Hannah Morris, of course, a past guest of the show here. She's racked up hundreds of millions of views on these videos. She's a heck of a climber herself. She was a competitive climber for a long time, a coach of the GB climbing team, and took the paraclimbing team to like incredible record medal hauls. She knows her stuff. She breaks it down for us in a way that we can digest and then immediately put to use in our climbing, whether we're just starting out or whether we are a V double digit or 515 climber. So let's just jump into it right now with the incredibly insightful and very gifted B. Fuller.
I'm interested to just hear a little bit about your journey as a climber and as a coach, and maybe weave in, if you could, a bit of your philosophy on how you do like to work with your athletes that you work with, kind of crossing over between these worlds of ours, as I define myself as a climber, but I also define myself as a dad and a husband and somebody who works and has a job. And, you know, I'm not just a climber. And so, yeah, I'd love to hear about your philosophy and your experience in that area.
I guess it's all kind of happened so organically. It's hard to pinpoint a starting point, but my belief, and I guess the feedback that I've received throughout what's now sort of 20 years of teaching climbing is it's more of a connection that I think you have with people that makes you able to transfer information in an effective way. So I think you can be an incredibly smart human in the traditional term smart. That's a whole other subject I could talk about for a while. I think our understanding of emotional intelligence versus intellectual, like remembering all the names of the bones and the muscles and being able to intellectualize everything. I think there's a very different type of emotional intelligence that maybe I was more fortunate to have a bit more of that, even though I struggled more with like dyslexia and learning and remembering terms at school. So when I realized I could communicate with people in a way that actually used the more simple way that my brain likes to break things down and understand them, that was actually relatable to people. Because it worked for me, it actually worked for the majority of other people. So I spent a long time trying to work out climbing because it didn't really make sense to me, to be honest. When I first started climbing, it was up trees when I was a kid. And I was just hauling myself around. I was following my best mate who was just upper body strong. And we were just like, campusing things. And then if we did get to a climbing wall, we'd go straight to the roof and like do like back somersaults through the roof. It wasn't climbing in sort of the way that I teach it now by any means, but that was quite intuitive for me to just monkey around. And then I realized that there was so much more to this sport that by the age of about 17, I was trying to teach to people. And I heard someone in my local hall, probably when I was about 16 or 17, when I first started working there. And they said, the idea is that you don't bend your arms. And I think I just heard it from across the room. And I remember someone laughing at this old man that had said this and being like, what is he on about? Climbing, you're not supposed to bend your arms. And for some reason, that thing just stuck with me. And I thought about it so much. And I didn't really, in that moment, didn't go down the rabbit hole. But I realize now I spent the rest of my career trying to really understand the biomechanics of what he meant by that. And it's actually probably shaped a lot of the efficiency techniques and the way that I try and teach climbing now, because it just fascinated me so much that we assume that we want to have really strong pull-up strength and being really strong in your upper body. And that was what it was all about. And I really like the idea that if it's not just about that, that gives so many more people in the world access to climbing. Because if it's actually more about a dance, so I now teach it as a vertical dance because I think anybody can dance and anybody can climb. How we do it doesn't matter. It's how it feels for that person. And if we can find the confidence and the inner flow to kind of express ourselves through that movement, and if we're not blocking out a large percentage of the population who think and say to me very often, oh, I'm not strong enough to climb, I don't have good enough upper body strength, blah, 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 whatever it is.
Right.
And I've seen in so many examples that that's just not the case. And I've kind of spent the rest of my career trying to get people to move in a way that uses their whole body and teaches the dance moves, not just the pull-ups. And hopefully maybe some people that have seen my videos might understand what I mean by that and will have seen the way that I teach my various techniques.
Well, for those who don't or who haven't, and I'll link to a bunch of them. And if you've probably seen Coach B she's done, millions and millions of views of videos with Hannah, and you're, I think, quite well known in the space. But there are likely some people who are listening right now who have not, and they're more podcast people than they are YouTube people. So is there a way for you to kind of distill down vertical dance and that theory, maybe use a real world example for somebody who's not familiar with it?
Absolutely. I will do my best. So I've tried to break climbing down into a certain number of techniques or moves. And you've got like your bread and butter of climbing, the rock over. So I always make sure that the first thing that my individual can do is move and function in the best way possible for them to be able to transfer their weight from one foot to the other in the basic rock over, which hopefully everybody can visualize what that is. If you imagine you're on a slab and you were to take away your hands and you had to step from one hold to the other, that would be doing a rock over. And that's actually my favorite drill that I do with everybody. It's to just test, are they able to, on a nice angle of slab, so gravity's working in their favor, can they transfer their weight from one foot to the other without needing to cling on? And that tells me so much about their technical, physical, and psychological relationship with climbing, just from that first drill. So that would be your rock over dance move, as it were. And then I would check that they are able to coordinate twisting, doing a drop knee, for example. So Do they have an understanding of the footwork involved in executing a drop knee? Is it being coordinated correctly? Like, are they dropping the right knee down to reach up for a right hand hold? But I kind of teach it we learn the dance move on the ground. I get them to do the move, twisting and turning on the ground. And then we have a look at what it looks like on the wall at various different angles. And then we might look at flags. So when you've only got one foothold available rather than two, what dance move will work to solve that problem? And I tried to teach it like a kind of choreographing scenario, so they actually understand which technique will help me unlock any given problem. And for some people, this is what I love the most about my job as well. Depending on the individual, I've worked with ballet dancers and gymnasts and some people who I can teach them how to choreograph a dance, and it's so intuitive for them. And within half an hour, they're literally flowing up the wall and dancing up the wall with this massive grin on their face, being like, oh my goodness, climbing is just so enjoyable. And then I can work with someone that might even be like 8A strong, incredibly good climber. And the whole concept is just incredibly uncomfortable and mind-blowing for them. And they've come to me because they want to learn how to move more efficiently and how to learn this dance. But it's really hard and unnatural for them to reverse that pulling process. So like part of my dance is reframing where your energy stems from. So I always start with feet, and I have a feet, hips, hands theory. And all of my moves I teach with a feet, hips, hands flow. And it's just fascinating to see how different people get on with that theory and how quickly or slowly they pick it up. And it's often the people that have less upper body strength that pick up the dance more quickly.
No doubt, it's almost the complete kind of counterintuitive opposite, if you will, of what I think many, myself included, would default to. When you think of climbing, you almost immediately think of your hands. It's like, how am I pulling on this thing? That's the thing my eyes are looking at first when I'm on a climb, outdoors or indoors. I'm eyeing the hold, and then I fall off, and the first thing I look at are my hands. And so now you're saying, no, hands last, feet first. And that's a little uncomfortable.
Yeah, I love that you note there that we are looking at our hands. And I think that is because of our peripheral, that's our default. We feel safe in what I call try hard turtle, locked off, gripping on tight, holding on for dear life. And I've got this minor theory because I just imagine my little niece when I first saw her pull herself up in her cot. Even when we're kids, one of the first things we do is grab the top of the cot and we put our chin up to the top of it and hold ourselves in there safe. And I wonder whether there's this intuitive feeling of whenever we're nervous, we want to lock off, over grip and feel safe. And that's a really cool part of climbing, trying to teach someone how to almost reverse and not fight, but learn to manage our intuitive desire to feel safe and over grip. And this is often why we get pumped when we're scared and above our clip. How can we learn to manage our mind? And that comes back to the psychology being a massive part of climbing. How can we manage that through breathing and practice and loads of different things so that our technique and our physical ability doesn't deteriorate when we need it to be the best it can be so that we can be safe or just send our project.
And when you're talking about the physical here, as you just noted, you're also very much talking about the mental, the mindset side of things, especially if someone is trying to unlearn some of these habits or what they thought were proper techniques, if you will, as maybe a more experienced climber. And do you often work with climbers who come in and have achieved a certain level and now all of a sudden they're needing to essentially return to the basics? And if so, if people are coming to you in that capacity, then how do they handle essentially having to wrap their head around this idea that what they've been doing, they need to kind of undo?
Yeah, it's really tricky, and you really have to have the individual on board and always sort of make sure that they're aware that in order to go forward, you have to go backwards in things like this. And I also think a conversation around what do you truly value as a climber? What do you enjoy? Because I'm not here to ruin someone's love of climbing. I'm here to increase it. So if someone actually starts a session and they're like, I don't really enjoy moving like this, but it's really like fun and intuitive for me to actually like monkey around and pull myself up. I want to go and like climb action direct and swing around on 2-finger pockets. I don't really need to do all this stuff. I'd be like, do you know what? That's totally cool. Like, it might be beneficial for you to practice these drills when you're doing your aero cap and your warm-up stuff, because it will probably filter out and improve your climbing in the long run. But fundamentally, if you are loving life with what you're doing and you don't enjoy this, you've got to ask yourself why. Like, what's your why? And I don't think anyone's going to get better at anything if they don't believe in it and it doesn't match their actual values and goals in what they're trying to achieve. So I try and be careful not to push things that aren't right for someone onto them, because it's not, climbing's individual. It's not that everyone should be climbing with a straight pivoting arm and doing inside edge flags all the time at all. But for some people, they absolutely love it. And I get the joy of teaching them that feeling.
And is that part of your process there, part of the vertical dance, the feet to the hips to the hands? Is there kind of go-to techniques, like you're saying, like the inside flag? Are there things that, for those who are listening who haven't tried this yet and haven't visualized it, when you're working with climbers of various abilities, are there kind of common culprits or more common mistakes, if you will, than others that are the easier fixes versus some things that really take quite a bit of time and nuance and individualization to help dial in?
Yeah. I'd say with 90% of people that I teach, I'd say they are pretty confident in rockovers. They might do drop knees quite readily. They'll do lots of outside edge flags, but an inside edge flag, front or back, is often the least commonly used technique that I come across. And it's the one that's super fun to teach, because it's like getting to teach someone a new dance move. And then when that dance move gets ingrained into their movement patterns and it comes out in their climbing, they get that real joy of feeling the real benefit of it, because it can be a really powerful technique when it's taught properly. And I think inside edge flags can get a bad name, especially where you thread your leg in front. So I think a lot of people do inside edge back flags, that I call them, but not many people do inside edge front flags. And they do feel more vulnerable. So I do appreciate that they're not commonly used, because they are one of the least intuitive techniques. And arguably you can just do a foot swap, go onto an outside edge and achieve a really similar outcome. But when it comes to really fluid, for me, enjoyable climbing, when you start getting a few front and back flags in, it feels really flowy and enjoyable. So that's one that I spend quite a lot of my time teaching people. And I've had a lot of positive feedback of people saying that's now their favorite technique, and they just enjoy implementing it so much into their climbing.
Well, the podcast is such a hard medium. Podcasts are great for many things, long-form conversations like we're having right now, but very challenging for certain things like nuanced visualization. So I want to try to make sure that I'm visualizing this type of technique. And if I'm understanding it correctly in my mind, I think it's one that I've been struggling with myself. So maybe we can talk through it a little bit. But could you describe what an inside edge flag is, and maybe compared to more common outside edge flag?
So the inside edge flag, it's the foot that defines the name, is actually the one that's on the foothold. This is where people get quite confused. So if you're doing an inside edge flag, your big toe will be on the foothold, and your flagging leg is kind of threading in front of that foot. And you're then having to engage your glutes and your core and push your toe down and make like a strong connection. I kind of describe it like a pair of scissors. It needs to have that strong locked feeling for it to be most effective. If you have a lazy bum and you let your bum hang down and your legs stay bent when you do an inside edge flag, it can feel really pointless and just pull you away from the ball. So this is why it's a really coaching specific technique in a way, or watch a video really carefully, get video and analyze yourself, ask a friend to help. It can feel really good and it can feel really bad. But hopefully you can visualize now, it's not the outside edge of the shoe that's on the foothold, it's the inside edge, the big toe, and the flagging leg is the spare leg that then comes through to lock you into a strong position.
So if my left foot is on the foothold, and so my left inside edge is on the hold, meaning kind of my hip is open on the left side there, and then my right foot would either go to the left behind the foot that's on the foothold and kind of press its outside edge against the wall, or it would go, I think to the example you just said, between my foot and the wall and kind of in that scissor motion, but still cross through to the left and press the outside edge of my right foot into the wall. And that's going to essentially keep me from barn dooring or help me to make whatever move that I'm trying to do in opposition to where my hands are at. But a tendency that I've had in this scenario is what you already mentioned, which is to essentially just swap feet, throw the outside edge of my right foot on the hold, and then just flag my left foot way out to the left, on its inside smear. And so could you talk about the applicability of, there's three different things we just talked about, kind of the behind the foot, in front of the foot on the inside edge, and then also just swapping feet and throwing the other leg out there.
Absolutely. So I think the key distinction that's really important to understand is the height of the foot that you're using. So if the foot is on quite a high foothold on your inside edge, the flagging leg is going to want to go behind, because you're going to get yourself really bunched up if you try and thread that in the small gap that you've got left between your hands and that foot. So if the foot is quite low and there's a nice bit of space there, you can easily thread that leg in front and make a nice comfortable reach. For shorter people, like I can do fairly high foot inside edges and they work quite nicely for me, but I wouldn't encourage taller people to do inside edge flags nearly as much, really, because they can quite often, just with a cheeky little back flag, reach the hold that they're trying to get to nice and efficiently. So the really tricky question is why would I do this? If it feels better to swap my feet and do an outside edge, why would I bother doing inside edge flags when I can do outsides? For most people, they will always just do outside edge flags, and that's totally fine. But there will be times where, in order to do the foot swap, you're going to end up sort of pulling yourself off potentially a bad hold or a really bad foothold, and you're either putting more weight through the hand and upper body to do that foot swap, or you're risking actually slipping on that foot swap. So you see it quite a lot in comps. It's also quite a nice little quick stability position for something like clipping, shaking out, or chalking up. So if you don't want to necessarily change your foot sequence, it can just be a nice little stabilizer and balance point to do a clip. And I often see taller people as well, just doing nice little back flags to get a clipping and have a little shakeout. So it's got lots of uses in that way. Did you hear me say about risking the foot swap and why it could be detrimental to do a foot swap into the outside edge flag?
No, but I'd love to hear that, because I often do the foot swap. I think I'm going to need to, in a minute, I'm going to ask you how I can try to ingrain this a little bit more in me, doing a move that doesn't feel quite as natural. But yes, first, it's probably good for me to understand the theory, because I am like a compulsory foot swapper. No, that's not the right term. What's the serial? I am a
serial foot swapper.
Yeah, I'm an over foot swapper for sure. So yes, what are the risk factors there?
Yeah, I mean, so if you're good at swapping your feet, which many people are, it's not a bad thing by any means. It's a wonderful technique and one that I teach all the time. But my argument is often, is it necessary, or are we just doing it habitually? And I use it all the time as well, obviously. But I try and question, could I have done that just as effectively using an inside edge flag and save the energy and time and risk of a slippy foot swap if I just stuck the leg in front or behind?
Right.
So I just question with my clients, is it habit, or is it actually the best way for you to do that move? And I think just having more tools in your toolbox is the answer to that. 'Cause there's no right or wrong in climbing. It's just having as many different tools available to you so that when you need to solve a problem in a certain way, your body intuitively knows what the best answer for you is. So doing drills, for an example, you say, how could I ingrain this more into my movement patterns to see if it could be more effective for you? It would literally just be step onto a really basic, almost ladder-like jug climb and set yourself a challenge of doing no foot swaps. Start on your inside edge and see if you can link together as many inside edge flags as you possibly can. And at first it feels really weird, but there's lots of videos demonstrating this on some of the stuff I've done with Hannah, where I've demonstrated how you can make that flow quite nice and easily. And it's a super fun thing for me to do one-on-one with people. It's a very hard thing to describe, but when you see how fluid it is, it's quite fun doing a time trial as well. I'll ask someone to climb something just naturally how they want to, and say it will take 30 seconds. And then I'll teach them how to do the same problem using inside edge flags, and it will take 8 seconds. And they're like, oh, wow, I had no idea I was on the wall for that much longer. And my question is always, did it feel good? And did it feel easier? Because if they were like, oh, yeah, I did it quickly, but it felt horrible, like that's not how I want to move. And it felt clunky and I pulled. And if they are pulling, then I haven't done my job properly in teaching them how to do it. But nearly everybody that I've worked with has ended being very excited that they found a way of solving a problem way more efficiently, but most importantly, way more fluid and enjoyable. Does that make sense?
I really like that. Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. And again, you do a fantastic job of laying a lot of these concepts out in these videos that you've done with Hannah. But for those who are listening, I'll link to some of those. But also, I think it was very helpful for me as someone who is familiar with the concept of the inside edge flag, but who rarely uses it, to just hear about kind of its various different applications there. And it is so cool to see. Like when I climb with a guy, his name's Matt, and he uses a lot of inside edge flags. And it does look like a dance, B. You're onto something here with this vertical dance, because it's so like elegant looking when he'll grab a hold and he'll just kind of like sink down on that higher inside edge foot and kind of throw the other foot down and underneath and to the side of it. And then I'm just kind of like bouncing feet, like I'm just like jumping, throwing one foot on to switch. And it is very much more kind of smooth and elegant looking. But then I also, while I'm aware of it in my mind that this technique exists, I still do find it hard if I'm like on a tread wall session, or I'm just doing like long warm-ups on an auto belay. I'll try to think like, oh, I need to do this. And it's still like, I find myself almost forcing a move that I probably didn't need to do. I probably could have just kept like neutral hips or something. And so I guess that's where good coaching comes in, because even though I'm aware of it, I feel like I'm not practicing it well.
Yeah. I've got a theory that we learn from everything. So if you do something and it feels wrong, you're learning just as much if you do something and it feels right. It's having the awareness of the difference between the two. So if I'm asking someone to learn how to get more proficient at inside edge flags, I might ask them to try and do one on every move. But I would ask which one of those moves felt right. Where did that inside edge flag feel really beneficial? And where did it feel really pointless and clunky? And that's where choreographing the dance comes in. We're not trying to say that this is the answer to everything, because that's not the case at all in climbing ever. It's a case of going, for me, to solve that given problem that the route setter's given me or that the rock's given me, my combination was rock over into drop knee, into inside edge flag, into outside edge flag, into rock over, drop knee, pogo, dynamic, inside edge, back flag to the top. And that might be the perfect conclusion to that dance for them. And once they get it nailed, it feels incredible. And that's what I love teaching people, so that they can understand which technique helps them and their body solve that given problem. And the more we practice consciously with awareness these things, the more likely they're going to come out when we're on-sighting, when we're doing a comp, or just when we're playing around at the wall. But for me, the satisfaction in climbing is my body intuitively knowing the answer to a problem without me even having to think. And then you're like, oh, wow, I didn't even know I knew how to do that.
Ooh, it's such a good feeling when it happens. It doesn't happen. It doesn't happen very often for me still, but it is such a good feeling. And it is interesting to think about, like you just clicked off the dance there, the equation to the send of whatever problem that was, which was like drop knee, rock over, inside edge, et cetera, et cetera. And you included some dynamic moves in there, which I appreciated, because I've been trying to work on more swings and pogos, and let me try to use some of my momentum to carry to the next. And when we're talking about flags, just to maybe wrap a bow on the inside edge flag concept here, correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems like the applicability of flags, for the most part, is to allow us to be and feel stable in a position. And as myself, as a predominant sport climber, I'm always seeking that. I'm always seeking to feel kind of as controlled and stable and twisty and still flowy, but I don't like feeling imbalanced, if you will. And one of the things I've been trying to work on, as I'm putting a focus lately on trying to become a better boulderer, is essentially to not feel like I need to make every move stable, but rather to be like, okay, I could barn door here, but rather than make it stable, why don't I just move to the next hold faster? And now I'm saving a move. And so where does that concept play in with the dance?
I normally try and teach people the dance moves on the ground to get an idea of physically how able are they to do it. I would have already done a profiling assessment of their body to check their mobility, their ability to actually do a drop knee? Do they have any problems with their hips, knees, feet, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
Once that's all been established, that's a whole nother kettle of fish. We can talk about that as well if you want. But once that's established, I will then teach them the terminology of each dance, check that they can do it statically in isolation on the ground and on the wall. They know which muscles should be firing in order to do it as effectively as possible. Then we try and link those techniques together more statically. And then we look at momentum. So there's the understanding of you need to be able to do something with a real awareness. And if we add speed into learning a new physical movement and concept, there's too much for the brain to fathom. So I often do it slowly, well within a controlled environment to get that all firing up and get those movement patterns ingrained. Then we get the fun part of trying to add momentum. Because what I don't want is for people to think, I should be climbing as slowly as possible. I should do a static inside edge flag so that I can reach every hold as slowly as possible. That's not always going to be the most efficient way to do something. It might be necessary for a small hold or for a dead point or a clip or whatever it is. But we need to understand how momentum can also be incredibly efficient. So once we've got all these techniques dialed, it's working out what pace do we want to have for what given move? What angle is asking me to go fast? When do I need to go slow? When does that change? When do I rest? There's so many complexities to this. So the technique drills that I always give people have a progression of a static hover element. So I always play the hover game because I think that's a great way of teaching us how to find balance and control, but also how to understand which muscles are engaging when. And then once we've got it dialed statically, we then look at how much easier does that same movement feel when I throw a bit of momentum behind it, and which technique on which angle feels the best when I add a bit of momentum behind it. So we might look at more dynamic drop knees where they're almost like a bit of a swing drop, for example. You may not even have a foothold where you need it, and I call them smear drops, where you push your foot against the wall and you use that pushing foot to generate the momentum to do a dynamic drop knee. My favorite thing to teach is an inside edge back flag pogo. So if you're doing an inside edge front flag, the one we talked about earlier, that's a very static one where I described the scissors. It locks you into place, and it's a really nice, strong, controlled feeling when you get that chain working really well, when your muscles are all firing correctly. When you are on your inside edge and your leg is hanging below, if we can visualize like a monkey's tail hanging down, we can use that back leg to generate momentum. And that's a really nice way to build fluid, dynamic movement without this need to do a foot swap to go into an outside edge to then do a kind of like dynamic throw off it. If we use the momentum from that back flagging leg, we can often achieve a move that would have taken a lot of strength and power and maybe foot swapping to get to. But that takes a lot of practice, but very satisfying when you get it dialed.
Yes, I know I can visualize exactly what you're talking about. I've seen friends of mine even just recently do it on a board climb where, they kind of back flag, if you will. And are those interchangeable, back flag and inside edge flag? Or I guess the back flag is more specific of an inside edge flag that goes behind the foot that's on the hold? Okay.
That's what I use. I don't know if it's different terminology in different places in the world, but I teach it as inside edge front flag when the leg comes in front and inside edge back flag when the leg comes behind.
Got it. Yeah. And so recently when I saw this, it was a inside edge back flag, and then he kind of released the pressure on that back flag and swung it way out. To the right. It was a left foot inside edge, and it swung the foot and created this like amazing swing of pogo momentum to get to the next hole. It was like so wicked looking. But I guess your point is well made, which is, we need to be able to do these things in isolation, statically, very controlled, before we start to add momentum to the formula.
Yeah, ideally, like if I'm working with a beginner that is trying to understand the concepts of climbing, if I get them just throwing themselves around doing like dynamic climbing first, that can work depending on the individual. If that's really intuitive for them and that's more fun, then I might start with that. But often it's something that we build in to a progressive part of the warm-up. And I might do something like doubles, where I encourage them to release both hands off the hold at the same time and try and re-land those hands on the next hold above. And then that gets them used to having to generate momentum. So in a kind of equal and opposite way to the drill where I'm taking the hands away on a slab and asking them to learn how their lower body works, I'm then asking them to release both hands and then re-catch back on. And it's a far more upper body challenging technique, but valuable in its own right as well.
This episode's brought to you by Rhino Skin Solutions, and y'all, we're hitting the hot days right now. And what happens in the summer? Oh my gosh, everything gets hot. When I'm at the gym, it's hot. When I'm at the crag, it's super hot. And when it gets hot, our hands sweat. And when our hands sweat, we're not able to hold on to things. So Rhino is here to save the day and save the summer climbing season. I want to tell you about my favorite hot weather Rhino products right now. First of all, every day I'm using their performance cream. It's got like a slightly drying agent to it, but basically it helps to soothe and strengthen the skin with a little bit of an antiperspirant in there. I use that every day. It just keeps my skin like pretty tough and pretty durable throughout the season. But then when I know I want to perform, when I'm gearing up to send the proj at the gym, or I want to have a really nice day outside, I'm going to use their dry spray or their tip juice. My hands stay dry, I chalk up less, my skin stays really healthy and good condition so I can have repeated efforts. And then I come home, I clean my hands really well, and if I've really beat them up during the day, I'm going to use some of their repair cream. I love the smell of it. I love the feel of it. It just works. It works really, really well to take care of your skin. And Rhino, by the way, is going to take care of you. They're going to give you 20% off your purchase by using code STRUGGLE at checkout. The link is right there in your show notes, or you can pop over to thestruggleclimbingshow.com/rhino to fill your cart and take care of your hands. All right, y'all, just want to take a quick second here to tell you how I'm staying healthy and taking care of myself as I'm now pushing my body to the hardest limits I've ever pushed it as a rock climber. And the way that I'm fueling these gains that I'm working so hard to get is with PhysiVantage Nutrition. Y'all know PhysiVantage. They've been a sponsor of the show since the very first episode, and I've been a paying customer of PhysiVantage since long before there was ever a podcast. And why is that, Ryan? Why am I buying PhysiVantage products? Well, it's because they work. They're designed by climbers for climbers to help us climb our best. Every single day, I'm taking their supercharged collagen before I do like a little light fingerboard workout, like the Abra hangs that I've talked about here on this show, or before I go climbing or go to the gym. And I'm also fueling up either before or after a workout with one of their protein powders. It's like my sweet treat that I have. And the most important thing, as I mentioned, is that it works. Most coaches and doctors and dietitians are going to tell you that you should probably take in about 1 gram of protein per body weight every single day if you're an athlete and you're trying to fuel your gains. So for me, 155 grams of protein is a lot of protein in a day. And I love a whole foods diet, but I have to supplement in order to hit that goal. And I do it by using PhysiVantage. Hit that link right there in your show notes and you'll get 15% off pretty much everything over at the PhysiVantage store, or use code STRUGGLE15 at checkout to get that discount, and let's get after it. I'd love to just explore one more technique that you could pull out of the bag of tricks that you have here, these dance moves that you've developed over hundreds and hundreds of hours of coaching sessions. And then I do want to make sure we're shifting and spending a good amount of time on mindset. Yeah. But we've talked about feet. You touched on hands there for a little bit, and hands are certainly something that a lot of climbers are focused on. But the second step in the dance focus areas, I believe, was hips. And what comes to mind for my audience here who just, range from very experienced climbers to fairly new climbers when it comes to your experience talking with climbers about how they're using and thinking about their hips?
I love teaching this, and it's one of those embarrassing things where I realize I spend most of my career talking about people's bums and telling them to squeeze their bum or hump the wall or thrust their hips or hold a coin between their butt cheeks. But right. Fundamentally, that really is one of the most important parts of that climbing puzzle. If you've got good footwork and you've honed in your feet being correct, the next sort of equal important thing is understanding how your hips affect the way that you move. So our heads and our bums are our greatest amounts of weight in our body. So where they go, we go. So the doubles is a really good drill to get people to think about the impact of their bum and their hips on their climbing. Because if you release both hands and go and jump to the next hold with a lazy bum, it's just going to pull you straight off the ball. Mm-hmm. So during these drills, I encourage people to imagine they're having to squeeze a coin between their butt cheeks or hump the wall. And that then gets them to generate an amount of momentum through their hips without really having to think about it. They just have a little cue in their mind, and suddenly catching that hold, they generate a perfect dead point, which is that moment where gravity's not really pulling on you, and they effortlessly hold the hold. And all they've done differently is engage their glutes and throw it in the right direction of the hold. So not only is the twisting of the hips a really important part of that puzzle, it's how we engage the glutes and how we connect that chain between the feet and the hands. I think we often make the mistake as climbers to focus a lot on the hands because that's the point of contact that we're gripping onto the rock. And we know that footwork's super important, but we quite often forget about that whole middle part of our body that connects those two things. So doing quite a lot of core work, like posterior and anterior chain work, to make sure our body knows how to connect right from the start. All of my clients' warm-up drills will involve things that connect their feet and their hands, and especially get their glutes fired up. So one of my favorite, I'll give it a silly thing that I teach everybody. In a normal back bridge, so when you're laying on your back and you've got your feet on the floor, knees up, if you imagine in that position, you're tilting your hips slightly and picking up a coin between your butt cheeks, and you're just lifting that coin towards the sky or the ceiling, and you hold that coin for 5 seconds. Everybody that I've worked with who has struggled to fire their glutes and have said, I don't really feel it in my bum, as soon as I say hold the coin, they're like, oh yeah, there it is. So having really simple little cues like that during most exercises, to be honest, if you imagine you're holding that coin, and the extra little cue would be to pull your belly button towards your spine as well, that's a cheeky little extra, then you can nearly always feel a connection of the chain that if you let your bum be lazy or you just don't switch it on, it doesn't quite know how to fire. So I often shout coin to my clients when they're climbing.
I'm literally doing it right now. I'm now holding the coin as I'm podcasting. This is just going to be like a mental cue that I give myself, because it is interesting when you lay on your back and you put the knees up and kind of do that bridge where you're essentially moving your hips up and kind of creating like a bit of a plank with but your shoulders are still on the ground, if I'm understanding correctly.
Absolutely.
That can be done with a lazy butt. You essentially are using maybe your thighs and your hamstrings to kind of lift your hips up into the air. But as soon as that visualization came in, squeeze the coin, now I can very much see like, oh, now the glutes are fully engaged, whereas you could kind of get into that position without engaging the glutes.
Absolutely. And there's a lot of things that we do in climbing where as humans, we find our path of least resistance or our most commonly trod path. It's my job as a coach and our jobs as climbers, as individuals, to work out what am I doing because it's just my most familiar path and my path of least resistance, and what could I be doing if I just veered off a little bit, cut down a little bit more of the lawn and worked out, could I bring that in? And as soon as we have an awareness of something new and we start bringing it in, it's amazing actually how much more we can just bring to the table. And that's, I guess, part of my passion of climbing is teaching people how to use their whole body to help them do this vertical dance rather than just doing what they know.
I'm gonna push on this a little bit, probably just because I'm a lazy butt climber. Is there a use case or an instance where it does make sense to kind of have that sag? And I guess what comes to mind for me, because I'm quite guilty of being a little bit too saggy, according to a lot of my friends on climbs, and I'm a Red River Gorge climber, and so they tend to be like, fairly overhung, but very positive holds, lots of big feet, lots of big jugs to hold on to. And then when I'm climbing, I'm trying to conserve energy because it's maybe a very long climb and it's pumpy. Yeah. And so if I were fully kind of tight and engaged this whole time, I'd probably get tired and maybe not make it through the climb. Whereas I often find myself climbing with some straight arms and almost necessarily sagging down, and like my butt is sagging down. Now that's increasing the angle and the force on my fingers. And so I guess that's the drawback. And so maybe less pressure on my fingers if I have a fully engaged chain, but then I'm using a lot of energy, whereas if I sag, now there's more on my fingers, but maybe I'm conserving energy. I don't know. What do you think?
There's definitely times where relaxing your body almost as much as possible is beneficial, especially with sport climbing. We don't want to be spending any more time under tension than we have to be. So like I mentioned earlier, it's all about pacing and knowing when to go hard, when to relax, when to breathe, when to go slow. If you can sit down, I call it straight arm froggy legs. If you can imagine sitting with your knees as wide as you can, like you're perched on maybe a little ledge or you've got two good footholds and your arms are straight above your head and you're completely relaxed in your lower body. And ideally, you're hanging on as little as possible with your fingertips because you are sitting your weight onto your toes by opening your hips wide to the wall, or potentially even twisting in. You might be in a nice bridging position or a little drop knee or something. But the idea is we're not pushing up through our legs and squeezing our bum and holding loads of tension through the body because we don't need to. Like if gravity's not pulling you in that way and you can actually be weighting your feet then I would 100% be relaxing as much as I possibly can in every part of my body. And then it might be that when we are moving from that rest position into a powerful crux, we might not even use our engaged glutes until a kind of snappy dynamic moment where we use almost the weight of our glutes to generate that momentum. We generate a bit of a swing, and then you snap your glutes tight at the moment where you want to use them. So it's not to say that we should be engaging our bombs the whole time. It's knowing when they can help you to find a dead point, or where they can help you lock into a position using your core chain more than just bending an arm and try hard turtling the move. That's the difference. And that's where climbing, again, is so complex, because every single angle and hold type and situation and different body type will ask for different amounts of engagement at different times.
You have such an incredible talent of distilling these complicated, movement concepts into like easy visualizations and just ways like for, a dummy like me to wrap my head around. I really appreciate it, V. Like, just like straight arms, froggy legs. I was like, oh, I know exactly what she's talking about. And like conceptually, you've just got such a knack for being able to communicate. Not only do you know and have developed a lot of these concepts, but to be able to communicate them is a heck of a talent.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. It's
I've got
with a struggle.
I've got my work cut out for me here. It is interesting with the thrusting the hips and kind of keeping that engaged. But I don't often do kind of more like slab dynamic comp style climbing at the gym. And I've been trying to do a little bit more of that because it kind of pushes me out of my comfort zone. I had a conversation with Hannah, as you know, with Louis Parkinson not too long ago. And then just recently was able to do some climbing in person with Emil Abrahamson. And he got me on some of these climbs. And one of them was like a dead vertical kind of, you have to stand up and then press into a hold that's way above your head. So you basically have to bring your body very close to the wall with momentum. And I was terrified of just slamming into the wall. And so when I was looking at the early attempts that I made, I was doing the move and like pulling up and generating momentum with my arms and stepping up high and going for the hold. And I would get my thumbs on the hold above my head. But when I looked at it like in profile, I was like the letter C. My butt was sticking out. It's like when men hug. You ever see when men hug? They never want to touch their crotches. So like they hug at the upper body, but then their butts are sticking way out. It was like, that was me on this wall until essentially Emil was like, you got to hump the wall was his cue. And that's the cue that you give. And then I did. And of course I was terrified I was going to slam into the wall, but I didn't. And then the move felt so easy. And so part of it is I guess it's just like a mental thing of maybe getting past the fear of like slamming into the wall, because, as soon as I did that, it worked fine. And of course I didn't slam into the wall.
Yeah. And this leads me perfectly into why the psychological and mental aspect of climbing is so important and so underdeveloped, because we can't reach our technical and physical potential if we don't believe that we can, or we're afraid of it, or there are any things between that brain-body connection holding it back. So that's a perfect example of, until you tried it and had a positive experience with it, your brain didn't believe that was going to be an effective thing for you to do. So that's why so the drills, in fact, that I spent a lot of time in the video with Hannah yesterday practicing, were all about specific drill ideas that challenge people in equal measure, physically, technically, and mentally. I say equal, depending on the individual. They're going to have challenges more in one area than the other, potentially.
Right.
But they're really fun in that they're challenging because they're a little bit scary. They're quite exposing. They involve a lot of trust in palming and footwork and belief in one's physical strength and technical ability and trust in footwork. But the progress that you see when I get people to do these drills between their first go and their last go, and their self-belief in what they're capable of doing, is just magic every single time. I can quickly run you through one example if that's helpful. You can see visually in the video with Hannah as well when I talk my friends through it in each one. But so one nice example is in a corner, you challenge yourself to climb to the top, so to the ceiling. I always make the challenge to be to palm with both hands on the ceiling, if there is one there, or just put your elbows on top of the wall, so you're getting a little bit more of a height challenge. And you're not allowed to pull on any of the handholds. So the challenge is to use the handholds as little as possible. So it's very outdoorsy. It's like it's taking you into a corner at a crag or up a chimney at a crag, and you've got to learn how to maneuver your body, how to press, how to smear, how to palm in order to get yourself to the top. And the challenge is always, I give them the brief and I say, go and play with this brief and see what it feels like. And then they might use a few handholds to press against. So they're allowed to touch the holds, just not haul themselves up with them. And then the second go they have on it, depending on what we see, might be to now try and touch a fewer holds than that. So maybe they're now getting to the top only any feet they like, but they're only touching 3 handholds maybe on that go. And you gradually take away more and more and more until their brain realizes by the end, actually, they didn't need to touch any of those handholds, and they were all security blankets. And they've learned so much about physically what they were able to do, because it feels like you're doing side planks and press ups sometimes.
Right.
Technically, they learn to trust their feet better. They learn how to do drop knees. They learn how to pivot their feet on small footholds. They learn how to palm. And all while doing this, they're challenging their belief of what was possible from the first attempt. And it's not to do with climbing a grade. It takes away any of that, what we think of as achievement in climbing, and gives a completely different perspective on, for me, what climbing is and how we can increase like our climbing IQ, not just our grade. And I think for me, if that focuses on the movement and your body's ability to problem solve in loads of different scenarios, not just tick a higher number, that's where the switch happens for most of my clients. They just start having fun with it, and then they get the higher grades without thinking about it.
Ooh, I really like this area. This is some rich territory. I'd love to keep exploring this, because this has been an area of, I think, struggle for me lately, as I've been pretty obsessed with just like moving up into different grades. I like set myself these goals, and I'm very goal oriented. I get a lot of pleasure from it. It's not that I'm not having fun. It's just that sometimes one can get swept up into the achievement side of things. And it sounds like you've worked with a lot of climbers who are that. I think as a whole, climbers tend to be pretty driven, at least performance focused climbers. There's also a lot of climbers that just go out there and faff around and have fun. But ideally, there's like a point in the middle where you can be performance driven, but also have a lot of fun. And that's the whole point of the sport that we do, because it's not our jobs for most of us. And when you are working with climbers that are, that I guess fit that bill and are struggling with, it might be fear of failure. You probably deal with a lot of fears. There's a couple things you touched on there, which is fear of falling is very real for me as a boulderer. Like, I don't want to break my leg falling off of a thing, and not being able to pull and just pressing and using my body in those ways. I think fear of falling definitely would come into play. But then there's also the fear of failure, in that like, oh, why am I struggling on this thing that should be super easy for me, or it's only a V3 and I should be climbing V6. Mm-hmm. And do you have any use cases there? I'd love to just explore that kind of side of the mental side of climbing here.
Absolutely. I mean, you used a really interesting word twice there. So the should word for me is one of the most dangerous words in my vocabulary that I've tried very hard to have a better relationship with, because I think a lot of climbers go through phases in their careers, in their climbing lives, whatever it is. And if it is your career, or if you've ever made money through climbing, or you have sponsors or whatever, there's a big should word there that's pretty legit and challenging sometimes, because you can easily beat yourself up and say, I literally should be able to do this because I'm being given free shoes and this is embarrassing. And that can become a really challenging demon in one's mind. And when I was a lot younger, that was something that I had to really work with when I first was lucky enough to be given shoes. And it's taken a long time. So it's something that I'm only talking about from I've been there and I've really had to do the work on it perspective. So I don't want to sound patronizing at all to anybody here when I talk about it, because I'm only talking through experience and lots of learning the hard ways. But for me, it's working out your why. Like, why do you climb? So if someone comes to me saying, I just want you to help me climb my first 7A, I just need to climb 7A. Understanding the why behind that is a very powerful way to helping them do it in a healthy way. In my experience, climbing is like a mirror. It reflects more about us and our lives and what's going on behind the scenes than maybe we're aware of on the surface. So if we really ask ourselves, why did I get angry on that climb? Why did I beat myself up because I should have been able to on-site that 6B? What is it behind that? And if you can have that honest conversation with yourself, that's what's actually gonna start unraveling the layers of the onion that might help you achieve what your actual potential is moving forward. I appreciate this is maybe a lot deeper than, this could be a very superficial answer, but I think to actually be really helpful in this topic, it's worth noting that climbing is a very weighted thing for a lot of people. And it's not just about ticking that grade. It can be multitude of things that we're trying to prove to ourselves through achieving that, or it's a distraction from another challenging area of our lives, or it's whatever. It's our therapy for a lot of people. And that then puts a lot of weight on it. So always coming back to the why do I do it? Like, why do I actually climb? And if you can honestly answer that to yourself in a way that feels honest and true, then I think the stepping stones moving forward. And then having that conversation with your friends or a coach or whoever it is, I think is what helps people to really identify what they want to work on and how they're going to do it. Does that make sense?
It makes great sense. It's a simple concept with a very, kind of not so simple or very fraught potential to pull threads, at least for me, somebody who, I'm going at 1,000,000 miles an hour every single day. Even just the thought of stopping to explore my inner whys is a little bit terrifying, but also I feel like could be, to your point, incredibly beneficial and rewarding, not just in my climbing, but in my life. And you mentioned friends and coaches there. And my first thought as you were starting to explore this part of the concept was like, who's the best person to talk with this stuff about? Is it a therapist who has no idea about climbing and maybe just like, who knows? Are you, like a therapist's view of climbing might just be like, they saw Free Solo 8 years ago. It's like when you just talk to like the random family member that are like, wait a minute, you're using ropes, right? And so you talk to a therapist about this, they might not understand anything, but then is your coach or your climbing friend equipped to help you unpack these like inner fears and insecurities and motivations around climbing? You probably do, because you're both coach and therapist probably for a lot of the people that work with you.
It's actually a line that I have to tread really carefully because I'm not a trained therapist. So if I do come across some behaviors that in any way concerning, I would have to pass them on to a specialist. And my athletes who will work with climbing specialist psychologists, and that's fantastic. And one of the reasons I'm so passionate about this subject is I actually was lucky enough to work with a friend of mine who many years ago I worked with the GB paraclimbing team, and they were part of the team. They were the team psych, and I was lucky enough to be part of that process. So I got therapy with her as well, and it was all climbing specific. So you felt like, oh, I'm not in therapy. I'm just talking about climbing. And I realized when trying to achieve my goal, I had this mental block with climbing 8A, and I knew that physically I'd been capable of doing it for many years, and it was my mind that was holding me back. So I was like, yeah, do you know what? I'll take you up on this. I could probably really do with some help. And it came out that it had nothing to do with my climbing. Of course it didn't. The blocks that were coming up for me were far deeper rooted than I really want to climb 8A and I can't. There's always, for all of us, there will be certain events in our lives, or even like childhood traumas, whatever it might be, there'll be things that have put little blockers in the way that perhaps are demons that come up at certain points in our lives. And for me, one of these demons was an inner critic that basically told me I can't do it. And I wasn't really aware of this inner critic until I started having these sessions. And when I started realizing how negatively I was talking to myself, it was quite a shocking highlight, because I would never say these things to any client, any friend, anyone I ever met actually, but I was internalizing and saying these things to myself. And it took this really good climbing psychologist to to bring out a few things that I needed to discover, which I then went on to talk to a non-climbing therapist moving forward, which was super helpful. But my point kind of this whole thing is if you have a goal that you're struggling to achieve, it can so often be that, you can get a little bit stronger, you can get fitter, you could get better technique. But fundamentally, if there's something that is triggering you during a moment before a crux on your red point, if you were to address that thing that's triggering you or that's coming up, your chance of being able to achieve it is tenfold. And you might have to train your fingers for 10 years to make any sort of gains that you could make in a few hours of releasing something that might be in you that you don't even know is happening. Yeah, easier said than done, because I know therapy is a very exposing and terrifying concept to a lot of people. But having been through it myself and felt the benefits of it, and part of the whole reason of my charity and stuff is because of my belief in the power of that process and that release.
Well, thank you for sharing and even for touching on a bit of your own personal experience there. This gives us a really perfect opportunity to talk more about the charity that you're working on. And I will just maybe wrap up kind of the climbing specific part of this conversation with underscoring what you just mentioned there. Just a conversation with a sports psychologist or a therapist or a coach who understands the sport and the motivations that go into it. It sounds like could be incredibly valuable. I recently had a conversation with a woman by the name of Lindsay Shaw, who is a sports psychologist with the Olympic team, the U.S. Olympic team here. And Kyra Condi had worked with her back during the Tokyo Olympics. And so I took note of that when I had a conversation with Kyra. And so I talked to Lindsay, and we spoke mostly about actually sleep and up and down regulating. We didn't peel into kind of the deeper elements of motivation, but I have touched on this with Louis Parkinson, who is experiencing something I think quite similar, not the same. We're all quite individual, but he shared with me that he was very hard on himself and was really a negative voice, maybe in a somewhat similar way as you were experiencing. Yeah. And I've had conversations with Hazel Finley, and there's just, there are people out there, I think, I guess for the listeners who want to explore this side. The point that you made there is pretty powerful, which is you could take 10 years to get strong enough fingers and climb through whatever mental block is maybe holding you back from achieving this performance goal, or you could maybe get to the root of it. And it may be harder work, but it could certainly be a lot faster.
And incredibly beneficial for all areas of your life. I think that's the key thing. I climbed 8A, but it changed my life. And it was nothing to do with the grade ever, but it was a journey that I had to go on that has put me on a really positive trajectory.
That is just so beautiful to hear. Thank you so much for sharing that. I love it. And a fantastic opportunity for us to now talk about climbing out of depression and the mental side of life and mindset within life. And climbing, as climbers, climbing is part of our life. But to your point there's just so much more to life. And I would love for you to share with us the work that you've been doing on this charity and how it came about.
It's a relatively long story in that I've been on perhaps a 12-year journey now with this. And it was 2013 when my best friend suddenly died, and it obviously turned my world upside down. And it was something that I had to learn to live in a world that didn't feel like the one that I knew. And I realized that I was using climbing really effectively to cope at this time. And it was a space that I now remember looking back was the time where I would still smile and joke and laugh and throw myself around and have fun, because when I was in that space, it was completely free, and you can't think of anything else when you're climbing. And even if you just need like a few minutes headspace, it may be that as soon as you come back down and you're sat on the mats resting, something will remind you of it. But even if you get that little break, it can give you that capacity that you need to just find a way to get through that next day. And it does just get more manageable every day. And I realized I was using climbing to get me through that process. So I didn't really realize this until it was probably 5 years later. I lose track of the timeframes. My brother's girlfriend ended her life to depression, and it knocked me obviously my brother, her family, to, yeah, it was horrendous. And
Wow.
it affected me in a way that I think it brought a lot of things back about Claire, my best friend, that I hadn't really fully processed yet. And I found that process almost even harder to manage, and seeing my brother grieving and seeing her family grieving was almost even worse than experiencing it myself. And I think the power of climbing came back to me then. Katie was the name of my brother's girlfriend. She was trying to use climbing as well to manage her mental health, but there wasn't the support network and the understanding of how to do it. And she sadly went down a path of she tried to get help, I guess at a local clinic or her doctors or something. I should know the story more in depth, but she basically came back with antidepressants, and that process was so horrific for her and the environment that she was put into, that night it was too much, and we didn't see her again. So that
I'm so sorry.
hit me like a ton of bricks, that there wasn't the support or infrastructure or understanding out there of how maybe with the right support and environment, there might be other ways to support people that we don't really understand or know about yet. And because climbing had been so powerful for me in my grieving process, and I appreciate it's different, and I actually haven't experienced depression to the point where I have spoken to other people and I understand it's very different experience for everybody. But the space, I believe, is that the difference between maybe being able to break out of a cycle in a positive way and just see that tiny little glimmer of light that sometimes just isn't there. When it's darkness, you just see nothing. And if climbing could be that tiny little glimmer of light and hope, then that's what I'm now desperate to offer as many people as I can possibly reach to find. So the aim of the charity is we're linked with doctors and other mental health services so that you can be basically prescribed 4 free climbing sessions with a qualified mental health first aid trained and obviously qualified climbing instructor. So the goal is you're taken through the journey in a really personalized one-to-one way, so that it isn't that intimidating situation of we'll give you a free entry to a climbing wall, but you've got to get yourself there and you've got to work this out for yourself. We want to really nurture people into that space. So with that goal, it's an expensive way to do it because we're having to pay for the instructors and the climbing wall fees and everything. But it was something that I was really passionate about, giving people the skills, because I think if we empower them with knowledge, and we then also have a buddy system that after you've had those 4 free sessions, there's a night that they go down to their local wall and there'll be someone there with a Climbed Out of Depression t-shirt on to welcome them into that space so they can start integrating socially into it as well. And I think that's a really important part of the charity too, that it's not just, this is a little package, good luck afterwards. We want people to find this community and see their place in it, because I think purpose is one of the things that it's very easy to lack in life. And if you can find your place somewhere, you can find your tribe, you find your purpose, that's where I think climbing can be really powerful and make the difference. So yeah, that's what the charity is now doing. We've spent literally the last 7 years becoming a registered charity and jumping through all of the loops that, my word, it's hard to do, but we're there and it's super exciting. So we had a fundraiser again the other day and launched the charity, and we've had our first people coming through really successfully. So yeah, it's super exciting. It's really emotional and overwhelming at the moment for us all involved, but it's happening. And yeah, it's lovely to be able to share that with you guys now as well.
Oh, so beautiful. Thank you, B, and for others who I'm sure have been working with you and alongside you to bring this to fruition. It is such hard work launching a charity. I've got a bit of a background in nonprofit work, and just at least here in the States, the amount of hoops that one needs to jump through for tax purposes and the donations and all the paperwork and all of that. And then just for anyone to take an idea and make it a reality is really an incredible feat. And for you to be working so hard on this for many years and to now have it be launched. Congratulations. Thank you. And also how incredibly beautiful and rewarding it must be for you to now actually see people benefiting from the work that you all are doing.
yeah, it really is amazing. It feels like we're really honoring what Katie would have wanted, because she was trying to, she'd actually studied psychology, and she was, one of her goals, and in the last blog that she wrote, she mentions wanting to help other people who are struggling like she was. So it felt really important to me to take that on and try and use maybe the position I had in the climbing world to make that difference that she would have absolutely made if she could have.
Yeah, I'm so sorry to you and your family for the loss, and hers as well. And now for you to take that pain and that heartache and to turn it into something that will help others to find hopefully quite a bit of joy, if not, just relief, but also joy and purpose and passion in the climbing world and the climbing community. We all know how special it is. So for those who are listening and who want to learn more and who want to support, how can we learn more about this?
So we've got a website, which is www.cood.org.uk. And I can send you all the links and stuff. It will be easier. But basically on the website, there's a donation page. So you can support in any way you would like to, or you're able to on there. For people in the UK and more London local based to maybe start it up. If you ever see people climbing up the wall wearing the purple Climbing Out of Depression t-shirt, just go and say hi. And like, for me, the message that I really want to put across is that one little smile or one bit of encouragement can go so far. And noticing if someone maybe looks a bit new to climbing, or they're on their own, or they're a little bit nervous, we all have so much power in just a smile and just being lovely humans. And if we can share positive energy wherever we can make such a huge difference. And it could literally be the difference between someone coming back and climbing again. If you went and said, oh, good effort on that, I found that really hard as well, I really liked how you did that. Or you just interact in a positive way, and that could literally be the difference between them coming back and finding a love of climbing for the rest of their lives, or going home and feeling lonely and never wanting to go back. So I guess, my main passion in this is, even if you can't donate, we've got instructors doing the job. It's actually the bigger picture, the message of the charity. A silly little poem I wrote when I was first setting up the charity was, be gentle and be kind, because you never know what's going on inside another's mind. And that really sits with me now, with just the thought of, it's so easy to judge people and to judge a book by its cover, or whatever it is, whether that's a really confident, cocky seeming person campusing all the routes, or someone that's really shy that won't even touch the wall and looks like they're going to cry. Both those people will be having things going on behind their walls that we have no idea. And if we can give everybody the respect and kindness that we would want, then the world would be a jollier place.
All right, y'all, that wraps things up with the incredibly thoughtful, insightful, and talented Coach B. Fuller. B, thank you so much for joining the show. Man, I just got so much out of this one. From the first, part of our conversation where we were talking about getting back to the basics and all of the movement mastery concepts that we dove into, I've been applying that stuff to my training and to my climbing and to my warm-ups and what I'm doing at the gym. And man, it's like having a profound impact on the way that I move on the wall already. I have been inside edge flagging like crazy for the last few weeks here. And one of the problems that I had been like stuck on the board, I unlocked with this inside edge flag. And anyway, I got so much out of that. But then even more so, what B just touched on here at the end with the inner critic and with finding joy, and having joy also help to fuel performance. And then the work that she's doing with climbing out of depression, and how all of us are kind of wearing our own purple shirt. We may not see it. It may not be as visible as a literal shirt, but we've got this purple shirt on somewhere. And I just love the climbing community. As I'm coming off of this festival here in Lander and talking with so many of you, we really are a supportive group, and sometimes we can get in our heads, but this was a great reminder from Coach B that we're all in this together. And if you have an opportunity to check out the work that she's doing with climbing out of depression, maybe you can support it or just help to spread the word. I'm going to put those links down there in the show notes. You might also have an opportunity to work with Coach B if she's taking on some new clients. I will link to her website there as well. And I just hope you got as much out of this conversation as I did, and that you're getting after it. I'm going to go rest my voice now, but I will be back next week with a full download of all of the fun and wild times that we've been having here in Lander at ICF. And until then, I'm going to go rest my voice. Now, if you'd like to see the uncut video of this chat, plus score instant access to more than 100 hours of amazing bonus content, and I'm talking about episodes with the likes of Adam Andra, Hazel Finley, Alex Honnold, Magnus Mitbo, Chris Sharma, Allison Vest, and so many more amazing athletes and coaches, well, you can get it all right now for about the price of a beer each month.
And I got to tell you, I could go for a beer right now because I've been working really hard out here in the podcast/utility closet. So if you are in a position to buy me one of those ice cold beers, it would be so rad. There's also a free trial happening right now, so if you want to date me a little bit before you buy me that beer, I get it. You can listen to all that bonus content for free and then stick around if you like it. Just swing on over to patreon.com/The Struggle Climbing Show to get access to that full library right now. Or if you're an iPhone person, you can subscribe right there in your Apple podcast player. Thank you so much. Huge thanks and appreciation to our show sponsors who have brought you this episode at zero cost. Check your show notes for the links and special discounts to those brands that are only available to Struggle listeners. And by the way, you can see all of the show's awesome sponsors and special deals by just popping over to thestruggleclimbing.com/deals. Hey, did you know that The Struggle's carbon neutral in partnership with the Honnold Foundation? They are just doing amazing work to bring clean energy to communities around the world. You can get inspired by their latest grant recipients over at honnoldfoundation.org, and then just toss them some love if you can, even a few bucks a month. They're doing such cool and impactful work. And lastly, The Struggle is a proud member of the Plugtone Audio Collective, a diverse group of the best, most impactful podcasts in the outdoor industry. This show was produced and hosted by me, Ryan Devlin, and edited by Glenn Walker. All right, that clips the anchors on this episode. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you liked it, and if you like this show just in general, would you consider sharing it with your climbing friends? The more who listen, the closer that I will get to making this my full-time gig, which would be so cool. So thank you in advance for sharing this episode and also rating and reviewing it if you got a hot second. Really appreciate you. I hope your training and your climbing are going great. And if you're struggling like me, well, at least the struggle makes us stronger. I'll see you soon.